Welcome to Think About It with your host, Jaden Miller.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my podcast, Think About It with Jaden Miller. Glad to have you guys back. Today is Sunday, and as you know, I drop new episodes every Sunday and Wednesday. Don't forget to like and share and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and please follow, comment, and share on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, I just found out that I am now on Apple Podcast, and so I'm on all of your favorite ones: Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, and a whole Google, and a whole host Spreaker, and a whole host SoundCloud. All right, and a whole host of other ones as well. All right. So I'm glad that you guys are with me today on Sunday. You can't see her, but in the background is my beautiful wife, Tanisha. You guys might remember that we did our last episode on our honeymoon, our wedding and honeymoon. And it was a really, really great show. Hey, I want to shout out to some of my former students, my old good friend Blake and Norman and some other people up at NAU that were checking me out. I saw you guys. Thank you very much. And for those of you who I did not name, but you are listening or watching, I want to thank you guys as well. So what am I going to talk about today? Today, I am going to talk a little bit about presidents, American presidents. And specifically, I'm going to share with you some accomplishments of the presidents since 1960. And then I'm going to tell you who I believe was the most impactful, maybe the most effective president since 1960. All right. So if we look back, we're going over these decades, 1960 to 70, 80, 90, 2000, 2010, and of course now 2021. So I'm going back about 60 years. All right. Because really, it takes some time to really determine the effectiveness of a president. President Obama and President Trump certainly don't have the benefit of time like John F. Kennedy does. But we can still talk about some of their accomplishments. And again, this is just my opinion I'm sharing with you all. I'm sure some of you all will probably have your own. But I may talk a little bit about some of the negative issues in their terms, maybe. But I'm really focusing on what they accomplished. And then, I'm going to discuss who I think was the most effective. Okay, don't forget again to like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel, and share and follow and comment on your favorite podcast. This is Think About It. So I want you to think about it with me, all right? So let's go back. First of all, can you tell me who the presidents were since 1960, all right? So, of course, I taught American government and economics. And so, it would be great if I knew who the presidents were back then, so I can name them for you. Going back to 1960, of course, we had John F. Kennedy. And then after John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, we had LBJ, or Lyndon Baines Johnson. After him would have been Richard M. Nixon. Then there's Gerald Ford. And then after President Ford would be Jimmy Carter. After Jimmy Carter is Ronald Reagan. And then we have the first George Bush, or he's also known as George Herbert Walker Bush. After George H.W. Bush came Bill Clinton. All right. And then after Clinton, there was the second George Bush, who would have been the son of George Herbert Walker Bush. All right. And then after George Walker Bush would have been President Barack Obama. And then, of course, after Barack Obama, there is President Donald Trump. All right. So those are the presidents since 1960. I want you to think about it for a minute. Who's your favorite? And I'm not talking about the personal stuff like, oh, I like, Bill Clinton because I like his hair, or, I like Jimmy Carter because he was a great peanut farmer, or because of, what he did for, rural areas and, building homes and that kind of thing. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what are some concrete accomplishments that these individuals achieved during their term in office. All right, so let's go back, all right, to 1960. Of course, in 1960, that would have been President John F. Kennedy. All right, if you know anything about John F. Kennedy, he was a young president. He was actually the youngest president that was elected to that higher office. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, his life was cut short, of course, in Dallas when he was assassinated. He didn't have a lot of time to accomplish his presidential agenda, all right, unfortunately. But one of the major accomplishments that that John F. Kennedy had was he founded the Peace Corps, all right? He founded the Peace Corps in 1961, and it is one of the most successful programs established during not only his presidency, but in the history of the United States presidency, all right? As of 2016, and this just goes to show his influence, there are more than 250,000 Peace Corps volunteers in the United States, all right? And as you know, this volunteer organization helps in different ways, such as in education and in construction. So the first year that he started it, which was in 1961, there were 5,000 volunteers. And as I mentioned, now there are more than 250,000 people in the Peace Corps. All right, so a major accomplishment for John F. Kennedy. Another one that I think is significant is that in 1963, prior to his assassination, he signed the Equal Pay Act, which was an enormous step toward decreasing the wage gap between men and women. All right. Now, even though it seems amazing on paper what he signed, it didn't bring full equality of pay, but at least it helped women get higher salaries than before the act's enactment. So, he started women on the road to equal pay in the United States. So we've got to give him credit for that. John F. Kennedy also signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. All right. You may remember that there was this major standoff between the United States and Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time. And Nikita Khrushchev was the leader of the USSR. And what the Soviet Union was trying to do is they were trying to put nuclear weapons 90 miles off the coast of Cuba. All right. And of course, the United States couldn't have, 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And he wanted to put them right there in Cuba. Cuba, of course, under Fidel Castro, was a communist nation, just as the USSR. And so there was this tense 36 hours where President Kennedy, told Nikita Khrushchev that if you didn't send those Soviet ships back, from where they came, all right, instead of bringing them to Cuba, that there was going to be a war on Soviet Union's hands. And we talk about how Nikita Khrushchev blinked, and turned those ships around, because if the United States pushed the button, and then, of course, if the Soviet Union pushed the button, and I'm talking about nuclear weapons, then we would all be destroyed. And so that was a major accomplishment and a major show of force on behalf of John F. Kennedy. Also, he improved the United States economy. All right. There had been some serious challenges ahead of him. All right. So when he became president, the United States was in a recession. All right. The economy was struggling. And what he did was he took measures such as the new frontier. And because of that, the economy improved. All right. So yes, he established the New Frontier, which was a domestic program that aimed at improving the living standard of United States citizens. All right. So this meant passing important reforms. And so I want you to think about it for a minute. Some of these things that we have today are a benefit based upon John F. Kennedy's presidency. All right. So, for example, increasing the minimum wage, improving Social Security and unemployment benefits, developing better transportation across and within cities, establishing a water pollution control to protect rivers and streams, passing farming legislation that would be extremely helpful to farmers. So again, we're talking about, U.S. presidents since 1960, all right? What was some of their major accomplishments? And at the very end, I'm going to tell you who I feel has been the most impactful, the most effective president since 1960. All right. Excuse me. So, of course, then after John F. Kennedy is LBJ. All right. Also known as Lyndon Baines Johnson. Now, the funny thing about Lyndon Baines Johnson, he was a Southern. He was in the House of Representatives, of course, and then he rose to the United States Senate. All right. Of course, during his time as a senator, during his time as a member of the House of Representatives, he was a part of that Southern bloc, okay, and he was a Democrat as well. But during that time, which really blocked a lot of progressiveness on behalf of African Americans. I'm talking primarily about civil rights and those kinds of issues. I mean, he was from the state of Texas, and Texas is a southern state. All right. But when he became president, okay, and especially after the death of John F. Kennedy, there was a significant change on behalf of LBJ. Now, some of that change could have been he was dealing with a lot of the civil rights unrest during the 1960s. All right. He's also dealing with a country that is moving quickly towards war with a communist country of Vietnam. All right. But what's really, really intriguing about John F. Kennedy is these two things that he had passed during his presidency. All right. The first one is using his political power to get Southern states, all right, Southern congressmen, some of which did not come along, but many of whom did, all right, but to get them to pass the landmark Civil Rights Bill, all right. This was something that John F. Kennedy was looking at doing, all right. There was a bill to pass civil rights that was languishing in Congress, especially after the death of John F. Kennedy. All right. But John F. Kennedy utilized his political acumen, all right, to get civil rights passed. Why? Well, okay, so if every day you're seeing on the news, all right, black protesters being beaten by police or, sicked on by dogs like Bull Connor did in Alabama, or for those of you that may not know history, but in Birmingham, the bombing of the 6th Street Church, I believe it was 6th Street, 7th Street, one of those. But the burning of that church and the 4 little girls that got killed. Well, see, this is playing out in the greatest country in the world, okay? So how is it that we can call ourselves great, but yet we've got Southern racists that are bombing churches? When government is sicking animals on American citizens that just so happen to have a darker hue, all right? So because we need to move the country in a different direction, John F. Kennedy introduced the bill, the landmark Civil Rights Bill, but John F. Kennedy used his political skills to pass it, all right? So he passed the influential Civil Rights Act of 1964, all right? And what it did specifically, because you have to remember, there's this little thing called the 10th Amendment, all right, to the Constitution. And there's also this little thing called states' rights, which go along with the 10th Amendment, all right? And so each state has its own rules, okay, has its own laws, all right? And so the state of Alabama, the state of Mississippi, the state of Georgia could have laws on the books that allowed outright discrimination. All right. Well, the federal government, the superior government in this land, how again do you call yourself the greatest country in the nation and in the world and allow discrimination? And so what the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did is that it outlawed throughout the nation, okay, discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, in not just public accommodations, but in private accommodations as well. So that meant hotels, motels, restaurants, theaters, and all other private accommodations as well. So if a hotel is owned by a private company or by individuals, but yet you want public people that to partake in the services that you have, well, then it can't be based on discrimination. All right. So that act eliminated discrimination in all of those areas based on race. All right. So now, what else? The 1965 Voting Rights Act. So again, now what we need to do is we need to eliminate discrimination in hotels and theaters, and black people should be able to use the same toilets as white people, which I always thought was really, really ridiculous. But anyway, think about it. But anyway, so now we've got the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So again, what is the problem? The problem is that the states, especially the ones in the South, okay, are coming up with all of these rules to keep a certain segment of the population from voting. All right. Now, again, I asked this question that I want you to think about. Is this fair? All right. Are all Americans being treated fairly? And if the answer to that is no, okay, and the answer was no, all right, then we as a nation need to change it, okay? So we can't talk about, oh, well, we're one country, but yet in part of the country, we discriminate against people that are of a darker complexion. Then we're not one country, okay? We're not one, all right? So we say it when we say the Pledge of Allegiance. What does the pledge say? You tell me. I want you to think about it. Think about it for a minute. What is the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. What's the rest of that? Think about it. What is the rest of that? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation. Now, if certain segments of the population can't vote because of their race, are we one nation? Or are we separate individuals or separate groups of people in a nation? Okay, totally unfair. So again, some states were imposing voting laws that resulted in discrimination against racial or language minorities. So they had literacy tests, all right? So you had to have a test. So you might have a second grade education as an African American because you were denied education, okay? And yet you're asked to answer questions that someone that had a 12th grade education could answer, all right? How is that fair? That's not fair, all right? And so it outlawed all of these different voting laws that especially in southern states had, and made it equal across the nation. All right. So those are two things that LBJ did that were really important. All right. What else? All right. Well, let's talk about it. Let's talk about his immigration policy. All right. His immigration policy was changed, or U.S. immigration policy was changed to allow more non-Europeans into the country. All right. Okay. So before, there were lots of Europeans coming into this nation from Italy and from Spain. All right. From France, of course, from England. All right. From a whole host of European countries, but not from south of the border. All right. And so again, he changed immigration policy to make it more fair. All right. All right. What else? And LBJ initiated many social welfare programs to aid the poor. All right. So again, if we're the greatest country in the world, how is it that we have this large segment of its population that are in poverty? All right. And let me say this before I go on, that a large segment of this population that was in poverty were poor white people. Okay. So a lot of times people want to think that, oh, well, this benefited African Americans or maybe it benefited Latinos. But no, ultimately, the war on poverty benefited poor white Americans, especially those living in the South and living in Appalachia. All right. But of course, it did benefit those that were living in urban areas. All right. So he established an Office of Economic Opportunity to coordinate federal anti-poverty initiatives. All right. He established the Volunteers in Service to America, which aimed to fight poverty in low-income communities. You've heard of Job Corps. He established that. Free of charge education and vocational training to young people aged 16 to 24. LBJ started Head Start, which is still in existence today, that aimed to end poverty by providing poor children with education and nutrition. How can you learn? How can you come to school and learn if you're hungry? In the greatest nation in the world. All right. So his war on poverty significantly decreased poverty rates in the United States. And again, all across the United States. What else did he do? Well, have you heard of Medicaid? Have you heard of Medicare? Well, Medicare provides health insurance for Americans aged 65 and older, and Medicaid helps with medical costs for low-income groups. He established these things in his administration. Ever heard of public broadcasting? PBS, public broadcasting? It was based on LBJ's wanting people to have access to public programs that he helped fund public broadcasting. Okay, so these are all that is still in existence. All right, so these are just some of the things that LBJ did. All right, Lyndon Baines Johnson. All right, so who was after LBJ? All right, well, of course, we had a change in politics and the political establishment. John F. Kennedy was a Democrat. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a Democrat. Lyndon Baines Johnson decided not to run again. And as a result of that, Richard Nixon ran and won from the Republican Party. All right, now I'm going to be very honest with you. Again, think about it. This is just my opinion. You know, Richard Nixon was not able to do a whole lot of things effective because for the most part, in his second term of office, he was mired in controversy with Watergate. Okay. And of course, you know, the House had voted to impeach him, you know, or I'm sorry, they were on the road to vote to impeach him. All right. And instead of getting impeached, he decided to resign in disgrace. All right. So during his second term, not a whole lot got accomplished. All right. But I will say this, though, that during his first term, he did establish the Environmental Protection Agency, which is still in existence. And it was as a response to the rising concern over conservation and pollution. All right. And so by establishing the Environmental Protection Agency, this agency oversaw the passage of the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, and the Mammal Marine Protection Act. All right. So nowadays, the EPA functions as an independent executive agency of the United States federal government. Its headquarters is in Washington with regional offices for each of the 10 regions and 27 laboratories. All right. And so more than half of the 13,000 employers that work in the field of engineering, science, and environmental protection have quite a bit to do with the EPA. All right. So really, really good organization that was created by Richard M. Nixon. Okay. And then lastly, he established the war on cancer. Yes, Richard M. Nixon. All right. As you all know, cancer is an ongoing battle, but he made a huge effort to end the disease. All right. He dedicated $100 million to begin the war on cancer. His campaign led to the creation of national cancer centers. You've heard of them, all right, that help fight the deadly disease to this very day. All right. So you're with me, Jaden Miller, on Think About It with Jaden Miller. All right. We're talking about who is the best president since 1960. And so I'm going down the roll here. And I want you to know that this, for me, is not about politics, okay? It's not about someone being a Democrat being better or someone that's a Republican that's better. It's not about politics here for me when we're talking about this. I'm just looking at and reflecting on these presidents and trying to come up with in my own mind who was the most effective and still has an impact to this very day. So now I'll admit that the ones that just left office, so for example, Donald Trump, we may not know the effectiveness of his administration for some time, all right? But there are some achievements in the Trump administration. There are some achievements in the Obama administration, all right? So again, it's not about, oh, well, you like Republicans or you like Democrats, because it is not about that. It's about who had some really, really great achievements. And in this particular case, LBJ did, John F. Kennedy did, and so did Richard M. Nixon. All right. So we know Richard M. Nixon resigned in disgrace, all right, as opposed to getting impeached, all right. And as a result of him leaving office in disgrace, his vice president took office, and his vice president was Gerald R. Ford, all right. Gerald Ford was never elected to the presidency. He became president. He was sworn in right after Nixon resigned. And so he ran again. I mean, not again. He ran, but he lost to Jimmy Carter. But let's talk about a couple of the accomplishments under Gerald Ford. He's one of those those presidents that's really not talked about quite often because, again, some people have criticized him because when he became president, one of his first acts was to pardon Richard M. Nixon, okay, which may not have been a wise thing to do. So if you have a president that resigns in disgrace, all right, and you have federal prosecutors knocking at his door, all right, and many of those that worked under the Nixon administration went to prison, all right, including some of his top aides, all right. Some people felt that Richard M. Nixon got a pass from Gerald Ford. And so he's one of those presidents that's really overlooked to some degree because a lot of people didn't like what he did in pardoning Richard Nixon. All right. But in all fairness, the rate of inflation was decreased by more than half during his presidency. All right. So during that time in 1974, 1975, when he took office, due to an economic crisis, the rate of inflation in the United States had gone up to 12.2% when he took office. Okay. And so in order to counter this, Ford went on national television and urged citizens to make up a list of 10 ways you can save energy and fight inflation. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you that this still has an influence on me because I still try to find ways to save energy. Okay. Ask my wife. Okay. I'm cutting off lights. I want to turn, and she may not even know this. Okay. But this is why I turn off lights, because we were asked way back then. And this again talks about how a president can be impactful and be effective. All right. So I turn off lights that aren't in use, because, the president asked us to save energy. All right. Okay. But as a result of us doing this, okay, meaning him declaring inflation was a public enemy, all right, in his speech to Congress, and by asking Americans to wear anti-inflation pins and all of that, okay, by, going to Congress and utilizing his bully pulpit, okay, he didn't give up, okay, on, ensuring that the public understood how inflation was having an impact on it. He stimulated economic growth based upon asking us to save energy and fight inflation by increasing spending and cutting taxes. Okay. All right. Due to this, the inflation fell 4.8% at the time he left office. All right. The Ford administration decreased the inflation rate to less than half. That's significant. That's very, very significant. So if we look at, 1974 when he came to office. And by the time he left office, okay, significant reduction. All right. He also reduced the rate of unemployment during his presidency. All right. So again, the rate of unemployment rose from 4.8% in the fourth quarter of 1973 to 8.9% in the second quarter of 1975. All right. So unemployment rose drastically. So the Ford administration provided compensation to a higher percentage of unemployed than at any other time from 1967 to this very day. All right. At one time in April of 1975, 81% of all unemployed workers received compensation. All right. Apart from providing compensation, Ford increased funds for federal programs like comprehensive employment training. That's called CETA. Okay, we had that when I was in school. All right. He came up with summer youth employment and public service employment. All right. His policy stimulated activity in the private sector, which then also created new jobs. All right. So during the presidency of Gerald R. Ford, a total of 4 million jobs were created. Thus, the unemployment rate fell to 7.7% in 1976 and continued to fall for the rest of the decade. All right. So I want you to think about it. And again, we're talking about fairness. All right. Fairness to these presidents, regardless of whether or not they're Republicans or whether they're Democrats. There were some achievements. All right. Now, I'm going to tell you who I feel achieved the most, but that's my opinion as we continue. But despite our political beliefs and what we may think about these presidents, maybe their personal lives or their politics, these accomplishments still have a bearing on, or these achievements still have a bearing on us to this very day. All right. So after Gerald R. Ford was Jimmy Carter. All right. Jimmy Carter. All right. Jimmy Carter only spent one term in office. He was a really good man. Okay. A great Christian man, felt that, he wanted to give the working people a try. He was the first president elected from the South, in quite some time. All right. And he won the South, by tremendous margins. And so after Gerald R. Ford, the country had really gotten tired of, Richard M. Nixon and those politics and how the nation looked really, really bad in the eyes of the world. And therefore, it wanted to change. And so Jimmy Carter was elected. All right. Now, again, he only had one term in office. And Jimmy Carter's problem had to deal with this little country called Iran, which, you'll see several other presidents had problems with as well. But one of his accomplishments was to establish the United States Department of Energy in 1977. All right. The energy issue was, again, one of the greatest challenges facing the nation. All right. So we talked about Gerald Ford and how he sought ways to save energy. Well, when Jimmy Carter comes into office, he does the same thing. All right. And so again, when Jimmy Carter's in office, I'm telling my age, but I'm in grammar school and he's trying to get us to come up ways to conserve energy. All right. So I still do these things to this very day. All right. Conserving energy was important then. I feel that conserving energy is important today. All right. So one accomplishment, Jimmy Carter established the Department of Energy in 1977. Next, he established the United States Department of Education. All right. This is what he said. He said, and I quote, "Education is far too important a matter to be scattered piecemeal among various government departments and agencies." All right. So he signed into law the Department of Education Organization Act, establishing the United States Department of Education. Now, this has been a really, really great program for the states. All right. So he continued the Head Start program. All right. LBJ started. All right. And he actually expanded the Head Start program. All right. Then also what he did was he provided federal funding to the states. All right. To ensure that all students, all children that are getting public education have access to a good education. Okay, so there you have it. Those are really two things that Jimmy Carter did during his presidency. You know what? Let me be fair and throw in one more. All right, he played a key role in negotiating a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. Now, if you know anything about the Middle East, they have been fighting forever. All you got to do is go back into your Bible and you can find evidence of how there's always been this problem in the Middle East. There's been a problem between Egypt and Israel since the beginnings of when these were nations, all right? And so the whole Arab world was, really against Israel and how Israel was established as a nation back in 1948, all right? And so they've been fighting since then, and little bitty Israel has been holding its own against the Arab nations, all right? Well, the president of Egypt at the time was Anwar Sadat, and Anwar Sadat wanted peace, okay? Because these countries are right next to each other, and many people are getting killed, all right? Now, that meant that Anwar Sadat wasn't very well liked in many of the other Arab countries. Of course, he was eventually assassinated, all right? But we're talking about Jimmy Carter seeking, all right, to find some neutral ground for these two countries to come together and be peaceful, all right? So another major accomplishment from Jimmy Carter, all right? So now, Jimmy Carter, as I mentioned, only had one term in office, all right? The nation then elected by large margins, okay? And again, I think that was because they were not satisfied with Jimmy Carter in some areas, all right? I mentioned the country of Iran. Well, Iran captured 100 and something American citizens and held them hostage. And Jimmy Carter was ineffective, at least his administration was ineffective in seeking the release of these American citizens. Now, when Ronald Reagan becomes president, guess what Iran does? Releases them right away. Because Ronald Reagan told him, if you don't allow American citizens to be released, I'm coming after you. And if you knew anything about Ronald Reagan, you knew that he would use the military might of the United States government to make it happen. And so, here you have Reagan coming into office and already, getting the release of these American hostages. All right. Well, what is Ronald Reagan? What are some of his major successes? All right. Well, now this is a little tricky. Because now Ronald Reagan comes in and, there's this new way of looking at government, at least from Ronald Reagan's perspective, all right? So we're looking at things differently now, all right? Ronald Reagan is more prone to business, all right? As opposed to, of course, Jimmy Carter and then Gerald Ford and Nixon and, of course, LBJ and John F. Kennedy before him, all right? So what he does then is he comes up with his economic policy called Reaganomics, okay? And most people will say that it was a success. Well, let's ask the question, well, what did it do, all right? Well, Ronald Reagan wanted to get the government out of the way of growing businesses, which is fabulous, okay? So under Reaganomics, he favored the reduction of taxes and the free market, okay? Now, again, it depends on your political beliefs on whether or not you feel as this is a good thing or not. Personally, I always like the reduction of taxes, okay? All right, and I also like the fact that the government stays out of certain aspects of our life, especially when it comes to businesses. Businesses already suffer enough, but to have to pay, these taxes. All right, guys, welcome back. I had a couple of technical difficulties with my podcast and my video, so I apologize for that, but I'm back. So the last thing I was really talking about was I was talking about Ronald Reagan, all right, and I was talking about, some of his policies, and specifically I was talking about, his economic policies. We had talked about communism and how the spread of communism is that which helped Ronald Reagan come up with his aggressive policy known as the Reagan Doctrine. And then I was saying that, depending on your perspective, on this whole thing about Soviet expansionism, you had communist countries, okay, that were starting to expand. All right. You know that we here in the United States of America, all right, we are a free market society, and the name of it is capitalism. All right. And so we believe in individuals being able to do for themselves, to be able to find a job or to be able to start their own business, to reach success. In communism, it's about people. Well, first of all, it's about the government owning everything. Okay. There's nothing owned by private individuals like it is under capitalism. And then there's this notion that all should be equal under communism, which isn't a bad thing if everybody that's equal is wealthy, but it doesn't seem to be the case under communism. And I'm not saying that capitalism is the best, because of course we have a society of the haves and the have-nots under capitalism. But what I'm saying is, as it relates to Ronald Reagan, that due to his policies, it helped to end the Cold War in favor of the United States. All right, that he was able to contain, meaning the United States was able to contain and over time reverse Soviet expansionism, which was developing. And his Reagan doctrine was very, very successful as a result of that. All right. So that's Ronald Reagan. All right. Now, I've talked about several presidents from 1960. I've talked about John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Richard M. Nixon, Gerald R. Ford, and I began to talk about Jimmy Carter into Ronald Reagan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this podcast on Ronald Reagan. And then on my Wednesday episode, I'm going to talk to you about the presidents from Ronald Reagan's vice president who became president, which was George Herbert Walker Bush, all the way to Donald Trump, and continue to talk about the achievements. And then at the end of my episode on Wednesday, I will announce for you who I believe is the best. Well, let me go take that back. I'm going to announce to you who I feel is the most effective president, or who was the most effective president from 1960 until today. So I want to again thank you for listening to me. Please continue to like, share, and subscribe on my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. I really love getting comments on my YouTube channel. Please give it a thumbs up by liking it. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, I am now on Apple Podcast. Okay, so I'm hoping that my listenership will continue to grow. Please continue to follow and to comment and to share on your favorite podcast platform. Okay, this is Jaden Miller. This is Think About It with me, Jaden Miller. We talked today about who was an effective president, or the most effective from 1960 until today. We'll continue this on Wednesday. You guys, I'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Think About It with Jaden Miller. Don't forget to like and subscribe to his YouTube channel, and like and follow on your favorite podcast platform.